Did Ukraine just do a Pearl Harbor on Russia? If you listen to Ukrainian bloggers, you would think so. It was a military success, but let's examine this and dig into it a little bit deeper and figure out what's fact from fiction. 40 bombers, over 40 bombers, and 2 trains. By tomorrow, they'll be saying 200 bombers. Anyways, was this a military success? Yeah, very innovative. Definitely a military success, but it's not a Pearl Harbor. Okay, let's put everything into perspective. First of all, look at the details. They're claiming 40 plus bombers now. I've already seen some of the pictures that are from Ukraine. Some of them were clearly not bombers. So either they hit 40 bombers plus other planes, which is unlikely, although possible, or they're just overstating things as usual. So we're gonna have to wait until we see the actual facts. Russia so far, I believe, is claiming 5 bombers plus others, and they typically understate things, but again, everything's preliminary. So exactly what happened. First of all, 4,000 plus kilometers in the rush, people were like, wow, Ukraine's got long-range bomber, long-range drones. No, they don't. Here's what they did. They spent the last year and a half planning this. They hid drones in like the roofs of old wooden houses and in a truck. And they launched the drones locally. And they piloted them, I'm not sure how, remote control or something, probably over the internet. But one of this truck, and there's videos of it, pulled into a gas station and the roof opened and these just drones started flying out. People at the gas station came up and started swatting down the launching drones with their hands and throwing rocks and things at them as well. The driver of the truck was found strangled with a zip tie, not by anybody in Russia. So first of all, that doesn't look very good because Ukraine's trying to get people to help them out. So as far as what they got, we don't know. It's definitely not a Pearl Harbor. I've seen some Ukrainian ones saying they claimed they sunk a submarine. That seems unlikely with little drones. The trains. On the trains, one was one carrying cargo towards Crimea. 7 people died. And the thing about this one is, some in Ukraine are calling it a false flag, like Russia did it, but there's a couple problems with that theory. One is false flags tend to be much bigger, much more incendiary. And not only that, but it happening on the same day as this, meh. So there was an explosion at a railroad crossing that the train was going over. Now the thing is, it was set to go off as the train got there. They clearly, whoever planted it, wanted to take down the passenger train. Now yes, I understand there are civilians dying every day in Ukraine. Let's not forget Gaza, and even in Russia. But this type of thing can easily backfire on Ukraine. Because right now, despite what Western propaganda would have you believe, in Russia, the civilian populace, how do I describe this? Again, it's a lot like Vietnam during, the US during Vietnam. A lot of people here do have opinions about it, but there's not much they can do about it. Rise up. Oh yeah, come on. You freaking Americans elected George Bush 4 years after. There is no uprising coming in Russia. But people, you know, right now there's not much we can do about it, even if we're for it or against it. But the thing is, you start doing things like this where it's 100% clear, and there have been missile attacks that have hit Russian buildings, happens all the time, and I've discussed how that happens. But something like this is 100% clear they were targeting civilians. There's no, oh, GPS goofed it up, oh, it fell in the wrong place, anti-aircraft. No, this clearly targeted the train. And if they continue to do these kinds of things, it's going to galvanize the Russian populace to support the war in a very strong way. So people are like, Ukraine doesn't target civilians. Ukraine's been targeting civilians since 2014, guys. It's been happening. Okay, but even then, most of the missiles I've said they're ones that have missed because of GPS jamming. It's not like everything that hits a civilian is on purpose, but it's been happening. So that's the summary so far for today. I will continue to monitor it because a lot of stuff's coming out right now. It's just completely unconfirmed. And the problem is the Western news, some of them are better than others, but a lot of them are running with every tiny headline. By tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like 200 bombers. Russia has no bombers left. But of course, remember, Russia ran out of missiles last year or 2 years ago, and also Putin had cancer 10 years ago. So again, guys, even if you don't support the Russian side, I'm not asking you to do that, but you need to understand that not only is your Western news lying to you, they are really lying to you, like big time, to the point that almost nothing they're telling you about Ukraine is true. And then you have to wonder, if that's the case, why is that the case? That's the big question you should really be thinking about. Why can't they simply just tell the truth? What is their agenda? As far as why I'm not going to show the videos of the truck and things like that, a couple things. One, it's a lot of time to edit this stuff, and I've noticed it doesn't really make a big difference in the video views. But more importantly, TikTok is super sensitive. Even showing things like that can get me community guidelines violations and things that you would not expect otherwise would. So I've just avoided showing that stuff at all on TikTok. And I know that I also post on YouTube, but I can't afford to make separate videos for YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. It's one stream. So anyways, there are peace talks June 2nd, which is tomorrow, in Istanbul. And both Russia and Ukraine have already sent their delegations. And listen, Ukraine, it's a war. I'm not saying that them doing it straight before people, but it just generally doesn't look good, because Ukraine, no matter whose side you're on, is on the backside right now. Zelensky came out today, and his demands for the peace talks are, this is off the top of my head, he wants reparations from Russia, no recognition or giving up of the lands. He wants a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. The man is delusional. They are on the losing side. They're the ones that are going to have to give more. And he just doesn't seem to understand this. And the whole problem with this is he's going to get far more Ukrainians unalived through his law land. It's just, the man is out of touch with reality, absolutely and completely. This would be like, I don't know, like during the US Civil War, when the South is clearly losing. Them like, we want reparations from the North, we want a 30-day ceasefire, and we're not gonna give up any of the land that we've claimed. It's just, and again, this is not about whose side you're on. This is just a simple, hard reality. Zelensky is delusional, and when you can't deal with reality, he's just going to end up, first of all, losing far more land in Ukraine than is necessary, and even worse, just causing the death of so many more Ukrainians. Let's also take care of this false narrative that Ukrainians have to fight because otherwise they're going to lose the whole country. Putin has never said he wanted all of Ukraine. And again, it doesn't matter if you agree with him or support him or not. I'm just talking about the simple reality. Call his bluff. Agree to let Russia keep the territories they have and go into a ceasefire. Some conditions like that, because Zelensky, you're not getting Crimea back. You're not getting the eastern portions of Donbass and Luhansk back. It's not going to happen. As far as all four territories, I can't speak for Putin. Maybe he would settle for less than completely all four. I don't know. But at this point, if your negotiating point is give us everything back and pay us reparations, it's just, I'm sorry to laugh at this because there's so many people dying in this, but then again, I also look at Gaza. It's just not, and you're not in a position to be negotiating anywhere near the terms that you're demanding. Do you remember when they pulled Saddam Hussein out of the hole in the ground? And can you imagine, they pulled him out of the hole in the ground, he's okay, it's time for you to surrender. He wants you to give me all of Iraq back and reinstate everything you have and pay us for reparations. Or even during Vietnam, imagine a few weeks before the Americans are evacuating, let's call it, because they won't call it losing. If the conquering Vietnamese were like, the Americans were like, hey, you surrender now. You give us back all of Vietnam and we won't hurt you. It's just, and again guys, just look at the reality here. I don't care who you think is right and who you think is wrong. You have to look at the reality of the situation. Because Zelensky is just making the situation way worse. The sooner we can stop this, the sooner people can stop dying. And Zelensky is only prolonging this. Okay, so it's a few hours later. I was doing stand-up comedy. Anyways, I read some more news. So Ukraine is now claiming that they have destroyed more than a third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. We'll have to see when the numbers come in. That seems like a little doubtful. But they obviously hit some, but I'm doubtful that it's quite as much as that. BBC and others are running these, I'm just going to call them propaganda pieces. Now they're like, they interviewed somebody in Crimea and she said, oh, they're teaching school in Russian. But guys, listen, in 2012, before the annexation of Crimea, Ukraine did a language survey. And at that time, in Crimea, 85% of people said they spoke Russian at home and as their primary language. 85%. And only 3 to 7% people spoke Ukrainian as their primary language. So here again, they're bringing this thing up, oh, they're being oppressed. No, they outlawed Russian books in Ukraine. They outlawed the importation of Russian books. You can still buy Ukrainian books here in Russia, no problem. And These are the things the Western press just isn't telling you. When you have a region that speaks 85% of one language and only 3 to 7% of another language, that language is clearly the minority, and it was allowed to be spoken. It wasn't a problem, but this is the things that the West just isn't telling you. These people identified as Russian. And even if you look at the referendum, okay, even if you believe it was unfair, inflated, it's pretty clear that the majority were still going to vote to join Russia in Crimea. Now, Donbass and Luhansk, the numbers, if you take all of Donetsk and Luhansk, I don't know where it would be. But if you take the eastern portions of Donetsk and Luhansk, Donetsk City, Luhansk City, and so forth, those absolutely would have voted Russian. They were similar demographics to Crimea. And it's just, again, whichever side you support, it's just a shame that you're not getting the true situation of what happened. It would be, I don't even know what the equivalent is here that Americans would understand, but it would be like if, I don't know, Mexico had Texas and 5% of Texas spoke, probably Texas is probably even higher than that, but it really was a minority in that area. People don't understand that so many wars in this world are basically unresolved border issues. You look at the Balkan states, they were held together by the Soviet Union, and when it fell apart, they went and redrew their own borders around religions and languages. Cyprus went through the same thing. They were, in recent history, controlled by the British until 1960, and the British held them together. But once the two of them, the Greek side, the Turkish side, fought against the British, when the British finally gave them up, then they turned on each other and started disputing over that, and now similar situation. And people don't realize the Cyprus situation actually is a lot like the Ukraine situation, an awful lot. You had the Greeks who at the time were, I forget the number, it was roughly 80% Greek and 20% Turkish by population at the time. And you ended up with similar things, although their lines were more along, not so much along language. It wasn't even necessarily over religion. The biggest issue really there was that a good portion of the Greeks wanted to join Greece and become an actual part of Greece. And because Greece and Turkey have been fighting for hundreds of years, there's still a lot of hot issues there, especially back in 1960. And so the Turkish Cypriots are like, no, And again, very similar situation. And the difference though is that in Cyprus, both Greece and Turkey, they fought it out, and I don't remember if it was a few weeks or a few months, but most of the fighting was, I don't know, maybe a month and a half or something. I have to go back and look. And then they pretty much settled down, and they decided we could continue to fight on, but neither side's really going to make a lot of progress versus what had happened. Turkey, despite the Turkish population, I think it was 18%, now has, and I'm spitballing from the top of my head, about a little more than a third of the island. So proportionally, they took about twice as much land as per the population. And the two countries are still officially at war. But they both realized, and these were two NATO members basically fighting each other, they realized that continuing to fight on really wouldn't change the land situation a whole lot. And Turkey also, again, like Russia, Turkey never wanted all of Cyprus. Turkey never came in and said we're going to take over the whole island. Now the Greeks claimed that, and they said this so forth, but they never wanted it. They just wanted, as they called it, a safe space for the Turkish Cypriots. And then of course they moved in a bunch of Turkish settlers, and that's one of the big issues towards resolution now. But they settled down. They decided, both sides realized that there was diminishing returns there, and it's been 51 years. It was 1974 when that war happened, and it's been a slow reconciliation, but things are moving towards it, even if they don't ever join back together. The two sides, they reopened the border in 2004. We were there around then, and people travel back and forth every day. Some people from the north even work in the south, and that's what's gonna happen to Ukraine too. It's gonna settle down very much like Cyprus. It's just that it's a shame that they couldn't sort this out in a few weeks to a few months, and it's going on for years. But in that case, again, even if you support the Ukrainian side, the problem is that Zelensky and his crew are portraying a very different story to the West than what the reality actually was. They're pretending like leading up to 2022 that they were just innocent people and never did anything, and it's not true. You can find many stories firsthand of people who their houses were destroyed by Ukrainians shelling them. And again, there are more Ukrainian refugees in Russia than any other country. And if they were being oppressed by Russia and they were half of Ukraine, why didn't they go to Ukraine or Europe? Why did they come to Russia instead? So if we're going to see an end to this, even if you support the Ukraine side, that's fine for you, but you need to understand the reality of the situation, because until people start from places of reality, we can't get to a negotiated middle. And another thing I want to add is, I know you can find YouTube interviews of Russians saying bad things about Ukrainians, but people who are doing those interviews and putting them on YouTube are really cherry picking. Sure, there is a very small minority that has some so nice shoes for, but most people here are just fine with Ukrainians, and they will tell you they feel like they're brothers and sisters, or even closer than cousins, although cousin in Russian has a different, anyways, they view them like brothers and sisters, and they have different views on the conflict itself. But the vast majority of Russians do not hate Ukrainians or hold animosity to Ukrainian citizens whatsoever. Zelensky they don't like. That part's very clear. They absolutely do not like Zelensky. And yeah, and I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. I've never tried to justify this conflict. I just report the facts on this, and I try and get people to understand the situation surrounding it. I understand whether or not I agree with him, doesn't matter, but I understand Putin's reasoning, and I understand what led up to this. But I want Americans to reflect, and this is not whataboutism, okay? No matter how you think on either one, things don't justify another thing. They are different in a lot of ways, but America invaded Iraq with Britain's support and others, and it's been proven through the Downing Street papers that both the US and UK knew there was no weapons of mass destruction whatsoever, and that they still went in. And they knew this beforehand. They knew it was all lies. And 1 million Iraqi people died because of that. 1 million. And again, the deaths in Ukraine and Russia, both sides, in Gaza, it's all very sad. But Iraq tops them all so far. And the Americans and British were never held accountable whatsoever. There were 0 sanctions, 0 repercussions. In fact, y'all re-elected your leaders, Bush and Blair. So don't tell us about how we need to be overthrowing Putin here. You guys re-elected. Think about that. And again, it doesn't matter if you support the war here or not. I'm just here to report what led up to it. I don't take positions on whether it's justified or not. I'm just trying to explain the history to you. Actually, there is something else I want to add. Somebody commented, I believe on Instagram, how dare I celebrate that Russia had made 2 new incursions into Ukraine when I did a report using a Ukrainian map, by the way. I never celebrated whatsoever. I reported the facts. I never got excited when they made advances or when they make losses. I'm not a Joey Contino in Russia. That dude, every time, you know, Ukraine takes out a Russian jet or something, the dude finishes. I'm here just to report the facts. And just because you don't like the facts doesn't make it propaganda. Doesn't mean I'm excited about it. I want to see this conflict come to an end as soon as possible. So news is still rolling in. Another one of the trucks that had the drones, after it launched them, it exploded and killed the driver inside. So this is real mafia type work. And Russia also caught several of the people involved. I certainly would not want to be one of them. It seems like they hired people and then just took them out, which, I mean, if they're planning on repeating this, it certainly doesn't entice someone to want to cooperate with Ukrainian special services if they know they're going to be taken out.